we learned was the Gemara darshan from a pasuk. It talks about what the big tekuna were made out of. It says as follows. It's a pasuk in Yecheskel. It says Kol Banecher. Not that. It says earlier in the pasuk. He brings a pasuk here on Daf Chesem days. The pasuk says. What's that? Which one? Oh, it wasn't my voice. No.
What?
No, but what did he say? Tafshin.
When
did the Ruf say this?
You didn't tell it to him?
No, I didn't tell him.
I was sure it's you.
No, it didn't come from me. So the Ruf's promoting that was epic?
No.
He did not get that from me. I Charuto, he didn't get it from me. He should have got it from me. He should have thought of that one.
No, but next year we shouldn't have to say it.
Oh, so it says in the pasuk, Lo yechkeru b'yaza. They should not put a gartel on made out of Gaza. Pa'ire pishtim yiyu al roisham. Milchnase pishtim you al masnaim lo yachkeru b'yaza. The Gemara darshan, they shouldn't put their gartel on where they sweat, like keep it away from any areas in the body where there are folds. And therefore, we learned that you should keep the gartel below the elbows, because from the elbows and up, the arms get too close to the body, and those are places where it will sweat. So starting mamish in the top of Daf Yuta Samad Aleph, Amar Abashi, Amar li Huna Bar Nosan. Huna Bar Nosan told me a fascinating story. Zimna Chada Havaka Imna Kamede Izgidar Malka, who Rashi says he was a Persian king, and my gartel was too high. Li Hamyani, he pulled my gartel down and repositioned it to be in the right place. V'taisineli, and brought it down. V'amerli, and he told me, I'm sorry, Taisineli, and he brought it down. Meaning the king acted as my wardrobe consultant. He literally walked over to me and fixed me up. That's something that normally a king wouldn't do. V'amarli, and he told me, the king told me, Izdik told me, Mamlaches kohanim v'goy kadosh. You're royalty, so you have to make sure to dress perfectly. And part of the requirements of the dress of a kohen is that the gartel shouldn't be in a place where it could sweat. Mamlaches kohanim v'goy kadosh ksiv b'chu. So kasoy lakamoida meimar, when I told him meimar this story, Amala, he said, Kayinbach, it was Mukuyim and you the pasuk, the Hayu Malachim Oymanayach. The Malachim are going to take care of you. And the Oymen is Hadassah. That's in the Megillah. He took care of her. He raised her. It's like a guardian. The kings are going to take care of you like they take care of little children. So that's what happened, because the king literally acted as your wardrobe consultant, and he fixed you up. Zaktamar Tanan Hasan. Kohen shalaka be'etzbay. A kohen that got a boo-boo on his finger, and he's working in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos. Allah is korech Allah gemi. He's allowed to wrap around as a band-aid. He could put around like a piece of grass. Now Rashi tells us that a piece of grass, the reason why you can put on Mishas Avodah is because it's a gnai that your wound should be displayed. So therefore, you wrap it with a gemi. Now a gemi has in it certain properties of refuah. It helps the wound heal. So normally, we know you're not allowed to do anything that has healing properties, because you might grind with different spices to make a medicine, and that's not allowed. But the mikdash, it's allowed, because there is no Isur D'Rabbanan of Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash. So Averis D'Rabbanan, things that would normally be prohibited midrabanan on Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash, is not prohibited. Avaloi b'Medina, but he wouldn't be able to do this b'Medina because there it's a shvus, it's an Isur D'Rabbanan. What if he was trying to extract blood and he wrapped gemi around to squeeze the blood out? Then kan the kanoser, because that's already the raisa of chabura. Rashi says, Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Chia, Lo shanu ela gemi. The only thing that's allowed to be used is a gemi, a piece of grass. Aval tziltzul cotton, but if it was like a small little band, maybe even like a little, like a strap, that's going to be usher. You know why? Not because of chatzitza, have a yiter begodim, because we're a kohen head. We know is only supposed to wear 4 begodim. A kohen gadol is supposed to wear 8 begodim. This strap is a beged in itself. Rashi teaches a bendel. A bendel is in Yiddish is a bracelet. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Loi Amru Yitor Begadim, Ela B'Makom Begadim. Rabbi Yochanan said, the only time we ever have a concern of Yitor Begadim is only if you're wearing something that would be placed where a beged is. So on your fingers, there's normally not a beged there, so there wouldn't be at all a problem of Yitor Begadim. In other words, even a tziltzul cotton wouldn't be a problem. Avol Shaloi B'Makom Begadim, Loi have a yiter, but if you have this extra piece of tziltzul, this little strap on your finger, which is normally a place where the big dekunin does not go, there is no problem at all. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Let me just quickly take a look in the Aleph. Loi have a yiter begadim. V'teipe kloi mishum chatzitza. So, frank the Gemara, but it should be a chatzitza because if there's something on his finger and he has to touch something to do avoida, whatever he's touching, this thing, whether it's the gemi or whether it's the tziltzul, it's being chaytze between his finger and the avoida that he's doing. Zakamar b'smayel. He only has this on his left hand, where he's not going to do the avoida with anyway. Inami shaloi b'makam avoida, or it's in a place on his hand where he wouldn't need it for the avodah. Like Rashi says, like on the gav hayad, which is, I don't think it's his palm, but the outer surface of his hand, you don't have anything there. You're not doing anything avodah-wise in that area. Upliga de Rava. This argues with Rava, and when we say this argues with Rava, that'll become clear in a moment. Upliga de Rava. Yamar Rava Amar Chista. The Mokim Begadim, Rava said, if it's in the place of the Begadim, if it's underneath your sleeve, then Afil Nima Achas Chaytetzes, even that fiber would be a Chatzitza. But Shaloi B'Mokim Begadim, but if you have something like a gemi, not B'Mokim Begadim, like on the finger, on the left finger, then Shaloi Shal Shaloi Chaytetzes. Only something that's a patch that's at least 3 etzbois by 3 etzbois, only that would be considered something that's a chatzitza. Pachas mikan, if it's smaller than a chatzitza, einin chatzatza, so it wouldn't be a chatzitza. So Rabbi Yochanan said that if it's shaloi b'makam begadim, there's nothing that's a problem. So as Rabbi Yochanan vade pligi, for sure, Rabbi is arguing Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said if it's not b'makam begadim, it's not a problem at all. Rabbi said it's not a problem up to 3 by 3, but 3 fingers with 3 fingers is a problem. So that clearly argues on Rabbi Yochanan. No? And what about Adar Rabbi Yehuda Barei Rabbi Chia? Because Rava said Shaloi b'makam begadim is only something that's 3 by 3, and Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chia said even something as small as a tziltzul, which is definitely smaller than 3 by 3. Zok Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chia mi lema the pligi. Do they argue? Zok Gemara no. Kishani tziltzul katan the chashiv. Maybe a piece of gemi has to be 3 by 3 in order for it to be a chatzitza. But a tziltzul, which is a strap, which is a davar chashiv, they're even smaller than 3 by 3. Rava might agree to Rabbi Yehuda Barei Rabbi Chia that it would be a chatzitza. Lishnachrina. However, there was another lashon in how this discussion between Rabbi Yehuda Barei Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yochanan went down, and in fact, it leads to a different conclusion. That we say that it's not going to be a problem is a gemi. But a tiltul cotton will be chaytitz. And Rashi tells us that chaytitz doesn't really mean chatzitza over here, because we're talking about shaloi the makim begadim, and it's a question of yiter beget. There's nothing to be chaytitz. Right, we learned it's speaking the small line. So chaytitz here means not chatzitza, rather what it means is a yiter begadim. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Loi Amru Chatitza bepachas misholosh al sholosh. It's not a yiter begodim if it's less than 3 by 3. Ella b'mokim begodim. If it's b'mokim begodim, then even a small thing will be a chatzitza. But shaloi b'mokim begodim, when you're dealing with yiter, there you need a minimum of sholosh al sholosh. Sholosh al sholosh chaytitzos, pachas begodim eina chatzitzos. Behind the Rava. That means now it's exactly what Rava said. In the first lesson, Rabbi Yochanan said there's no yiter begodim at all. Shaloi b'mokim begodim. That didn't stem with Rava, who said anything more than three etzbois would be a problem of yiter begodim. But here Rabbi Yochanan says exactly what Rava said, that 3 etzbois or 3 etzbois and larger is considered yiter begodim, just like Rava says, and smaller isn't. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rava say exactly the same thing. So Amar B'chista Lema Pligi at Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia. Is Rava arguing on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia? Now you need to understand. Here, Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia is clearly arguing on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan commented on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia said, "Lo shanu l'gem bevel tziltzil will be chaytzeitz," and Rabbi Yochanan said, "Even a tziltzil is not chaytzeitz. Dafka sholosh al sholosh." We know Rabbi Yochanan is arguing on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia because he's commenting on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia. Rava said exactly the same halacha as Rabbi Chisda, Dafka 3. The difference between Rava and Rabbi Yochanan is Rabbi Yochanan was commenting on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia. Rava wasn't commenting on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia. He said an independent halacha. So therefore, maybe he argues on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia just like Rabbi Yochanan does, or maybe not. Or maybe Shani Tziltzil Katan the Chashiv. Maybe Rava would be moide to Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia that Vibalt a Tziltzil Katan is an actual beggar, it's an actual strap, it's a Dover Chashiv. He would agree that even less than 3 by 3. However, Rabbi Yochanan, who uses the same words as Rava, but he's commenting on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia, must argue and say, no matter what, it's only going to be a problem if it's 3 by 3. Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who holds Davka 3 by 3, Ma irya gemi lishmeinon tiltul katan. Zokt Rashi, Rabbi Yochanan da Amar afilu tiltul loy chayitz. Rabbi Yochanan just expressed in the second lashon that a tiltul katan is not chayitz, and he argued on Rabbi Yehuda B'Rei Rabbi Chia. So according to him, let's go back to the original Mishnah that we quoted. This Mishnah is in Eruvin. Tanan Osam Koyin Shaloka Betzboi Korech Allah Gemi. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the Mishnah could have said a bigger Kiddush. Korech Allah Tziltzil Katan, and even that would be mutter. So why did it say B'dafka Gemi? Zog to Gemara, with Rabbi Yochanan, my ear Yigemi, L'shvin Tziltzil Katan, which would be a bigger Kiddush. Let's look at the base and see what the Bach says. Agav Urche, it's Agav Urche, Milsa, Agav Urche, or he takes the word Milsa out, Agav Urche Kamash Malon, the Gemi Masi. It's telling you a Kiddush that don't be concerned with Isur Rabbanon, a Shvus Rabbanon in the Beis HaMikdash. And a Gemi, the Kiddush is that a Gemi is a Shvus Rabbanon. Why is a Gemi Shvus Rabbanon? As Rashi said earlier, because it had healing properties, and doing administering medicine on Shabbos is also with Rabbanon, Gzeira Mishum Shchichas HaMamonin, but in the Beis HaMikdash, there is no such Gzeira. And that's what the Mishnah is trying to tell us, that putting a Gemi on a wound is actually like putting Neosporin on. Boy Rava, Nichnas Aloi Ruach Bebigdoi. Your sleeve doesn't sit flat on your arm like a spandex beged. There's air in between. There's air in between the beged and your skin. So what about nichnas aloi ruach bebigdoi? So there's some airspace in between. Is that a chatitza? Mao al besorei ba'inon. You need al besorei, and if you look, it says v'lovash hakoyin midei bad u'michnas bad yilbash al besorei. Does it have to be mamish on his basar? V'aleka idilma derech levisha v'kach. Or it's the normal thing when you wear something, there'll be a little air spots inside, and that's not called a chatitza. Kina ma'ushatachutz. Would a lice be a chatitza? If it's a dead lice, it's for sure a chatitza because a person would brush it off. The vadei chaytza. The question is if it was a live lice. and do you say even the asava ozla rabbi sehi? It's considered normal growth of a person's skin. It's not a chayitza or keeping the kapara law, since a person would wipe it off if he saw it. Chayitza, it's chayitza. So it seems a little bit strange. Why would you think that it's bottled to your body? So the Mesivta brings down that it's brought down that the origins of a lice grows out of the sweat of a person's skin. So it grows out of his hand, and lice are always moving around. Sometimes they're on the skin, sometimes not. So it's normal for your skin to have lice on it. I'm not sure how people would feel about that today, but since it's normal that people should have lice on their skin, maybe you wouldn't be chatzitza. So that was a Gemara shayla. How about offer? What if you have dirt, earth on your skin? Ma'ashiyachutz. Zakt Gemara, what do you mean? Offer vadechayitz. Why wouldn't it be chatzitza? Everyone's makbid on it. Avak offer, a very fine dust that you find often in the air. Would that also be chatzitza mao? And the Gemara remains without answering this question. Beis hashechi mao sheyachutz. Is your underarm chayitz? Meaning, what if you have a sleeve like I have? It's not the way I refer to this type of outfit. It's not a religion-revealing tight beged. You know what a religion-revealing tight beged is? It's a beged that's spandex, that's so tight you can tell someone's religion when they wear that beged. So it's not so tight. So you could see my underarm doesn't touch directly the beged because my sleeve is a little bit bigger than my arm. But what if I was wearing a spandex type of clothing? It would hug my body, and then even my underarm area would be connected. Everything is connected directly to the beged. What if the sleeve is bigger? It's a big open sleeve, and therefore hanging down a little bit. So it's not directly touching your arm and your underarm. Zok to Gemara, Mao shiyachatz al basari b'nei like it does literally you have to be on your body like a religion revealing outfit. Dilma.
Outfit doesn't have to be.
Sorry?
Outfit
Yeah,
doesn't
that's right.
have to be.
It's normal not to wear such tight
Extra
clothes.
slim fit.
I call that gender revealing. I'm the one who sued the bathrobe company because they called my bathrobe one size fits all, and I sued them. It's really one size fits most. What if a person stuck his hand in his shirt? So for a moment, his own hand is being chaytzit between his shirt and his body. Now, gufay michait, will his own guf, his hand, be a chaytzit or not? Nima ma'ashadochas. What about a fiber, a thread? Of course it's chaytzit. It's not part of the beged. Nima vadechaytza. Nima midul delas ma'u. What if one of the threads of the beged itself is sticking out? So it's connected to the beged, but sometimes there's a little piece of thread that sticks out. So it's a thread from the beged itself. Is that going to be a chaditza? Again, the Gemara remains with the shaila. Boy mar bar Rashi, yotza sairoi bebegdei ma. Rashi learns, what if his hair was so long that his hair got in between, or his beard got in between his shirt and his body? Mao sairoi kagufei dami or laf kagufei dami. So the first question everyone's going to ask is, isn't there a halacha that a kohen has to take a haircut once in 30 days? How will he ever have such long hair? So the Mefarshim tell us that yes, a kohen has to take a haircut every 30 days, but that doesn't mean if he didn't, that his avodah would be psula. His avodah would be kosher. It's not a good thing to do, but avodah would be psula. I guess they have to make sure. I guess that by avodah wouldn't be the to hear the shaila is, will it passel the avodah? That's only one shot. The other Rishonim will learn. Shot in the shaila is, what if a guy has a very hairy chest and his hair pokes through the beged? So that hair is not within the beged. So it could be that hair is not wearing a beged, and the whole body, including his hairy chest, have to wear a beged. So that's a shaila. Boy, Reb Zeir, how about tefillin? Ma'u sheyachutzu. Would tefillin be a chatitza? Zakt Gemara, Ali b'demanda Amar Laila lavzman tefillin hu. If your old Laila is lavzman tefillin, loiti boilan, it's poshet that kivan the Laila chaitzi. By night, the tefillin would be a chatitza because they're not even a mitzvah at that time. So therefore, once they're a chatitza by night, yoim nami chaitzi, they'd be a chatitza by day too. And Rashi says, I'm sorry, Haktoris Emurim. And Rashi says, and the Rishonim have a difficulty with it. But Rashi says, just because at night they're chaytis, the automatic by day they're chaytis. So Rashi says because we know the avoida is more chomer by day than it is by night. So if it's going to be chaytis by night, it should be chaytis by day. So they're trying to ask, well, what's that shayches? What's that shayches? Just because avoida is more chomer, they're chaytis, they're not chaytis because they're a mitzvah, they're not a mitzvah. So I believe that the Mesivta brings down from, could be it's the Meshachachim or the Svasemes. Let me see where he says it. The Tamu b'Svasemes. V'ar Sameach. Ma'adu lo mistaber lo mikein. V'lo ma'shapoyz ma'tfilin davka b'avoidis laila. Ain't a machmus chumras avoidis laila. It's not a chumra of avoidis laila. It's just because also b'zman zeh kivan she'eina nechos mitzvah ain't a mental l'gufoy. Ma'shenka b'yom she'mitzvah lo nichem. So therefore the bottle. So he says that Tosfos learns differently than Rashi. Rashi's learning the shaila is if it's a yiter beged. But Tosfos learns the question is if it's a chatzitza. It's actually in between the beged and your body, is that a chatzitza? And on that he said, since the mitzvah is rak b'yom and not b'layla, so therefore we'll say they're not bottled to the guf. Because at night you take them off. If they were always there, 24 hours, then it will be like a chelik of your guf. So that's what that explains it according to Tosfos. But according to Rashi, it's a little bit shver. Why should there make a difference? But anyway, the Gemara says weiter. My mitzvah de gufei chayitz, oy loy chayitz. Do you say since it's a mitzvah in this guf, it will be chayitz or is it not chayitz? That is going to be the shayla. Zok Rashi. So here it's the Rashi is an interesting thing. Time of keeping the avodas laila chaytzen the haloi mitzvah hava. The tefillin is not a mitzvah at night. Then the havu kagufay that we would consider it like this guf mishum chavivusa the mitzvahs. So the balt of the chavivus on the mitzvah that makes it bottle to his guf. Therefore, the yom nami chayti the loikein matinu avodas laila chamer avodas shoyim vein kalamahem, and that was the problem. That was the problem that the Yerushalayim and the Chasasemes has on Rashi. So keep the bottle of man tefillin, and therefore you're always wearing the tefillin. My mitzvah the gufei chayitz, oiloi chayitz. Do you say since it's a mitzvah of his guf, it'll be chayitz, or maybe no? Maybe it's not a chatzitza because it's bottled to his body. Now, there's a very interesting shiloh that the Yerushalayim and the Chasasemes asks. Even if you hold Laila Zman tefillin, what about Shabbos and Yom Tov where you don't wear tefillin? So weiter. Once you say there's a certain point where it's not chayit, where it doesn't belong, it's going to be chayit. So I don't know the sugya, but the Shemech concludes that if you hold that Laila's man tefillin, then you're also allowed to wear tefillin on Shabbos because you're just not mekayim the mitzvah, but you could wear it on Shabbos. It's not also to wear. Zog Gemara igalgul mitzvah, igalgul mitzvah. This shaila was an intriguing shaila. People were talking about it. And eventually the shaila reached the ears of Rabami, the Motla Kamid Rabami. Amar Lei, he told him, Talmud Arachu B'Yadeinu. I don't know why you have a shaila. It's a mefurish halacha that we all know. That tefillin chaytzatzais. Tefillin are chaytzais between the tefillin and the begodim. Freit Gemara Meisvei. How could you say tefillin are chaytzais? The Brisa says, Chayhanim by Veidasan, Ulavim b'Duchanan, V'Yisrael b'Maimadan. During all this period of time, Piturin minat tefillah, minat tefillin. It says they're potter from wearing tefillin while they're on duty. But it doesn't say that it's also for a kohen to wear because it'll be a chatzitza. It just says it's potter, it's optional. My love, im hinichan, einan chaytzitzitz. So Oibazah, you have a raya that it's not a chatzitza, so you're telling me Talmud Arechu B'Yadeinu tefillin chaytzitzitz. But the Brisa says mashma it won't be a chatzitza. Dr. Malai. If that's the case, it should have said that it's also for a kohen to wear tefillin while he's doing the avodah. Dr. Mar, you know why I didn't use a lashon of asurin, even though betzim it is also because it's a chatzitza. But we're not only talking about a kohen, we're talking about a Levi in Israel who don't wear big kahuna. Given the Levim Israelim, the loy master also, the word also wouldn't make sense there. That's a word that would work equally for the kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, even though for the kohen it's actually a surin as well. But we have a brasha that says beferish. So how can you tell me Talmud Aruch that it's tefillin chaytzotzos? We have a brayse that says beferish is not a chaytzitzo. It depends. Tefillin der yad, which is underneath your sleeve, that's going to be chaytzitz because it's right there where your shirt is. But tefillin der roish is not chaytzitz. You know why? Because the tefillin is placed on the head in a place where the hat does not go. The Gemara is going to figure that out. The so how could you have a chatzitza by the mitznefes and not? I'm sorry. How could you be allowed to have one? Why would it not be a chatzitza? The Gemara Tana we learned Sairei hayonira bein tzitz lemitznefes. In fact, the mitznefes didn't cover all the hair. There was a little space of hair available. Shesham, that's the place where manichin tefillin. So you see clearly that it was designed so that there should be a place to put your tefillin underneath where the hat doesn't cover. As Rashi says, I'm sorry? It doesn't show that. Why did the Tana have to tell you it's not even where the hat is. It's not even where the misnavet is. So why does the Tana say it's not chayjus? Not chayjus because it's not in between your head and the hat. He's just trying to say that the tefillin is not considered a beged, and then there would be a problem of yitur begadim. So we were learning this yesterday by the break. So the Rav of the shul that I was at, Rabbi Apter, says it's an interesting Gemara here because we discussed you're not allowed to be yitur begadim, you're not allowed to be mechusar begadim. But what if the kohen gadol did the avodah, all of the avodah in the big days of, and he didn't change into the big day lovin? Now we know he's not supposed to wear the big days off because en kateger not sneger reminds Hashem of the egel. But afal pikein it doesn't say that the avodah is psula, so there's actually a shaila about it. So it's not yitur begadim, but it's extra, but it's the wrong style. What's that? No. He was also preparing. He's also preparing for the next couple of days. Zot Gemara mechutzer kippurim minolan. How do you know that if someone's a mechutzer kippurim, he owes karbonis? How do you know that there is a avodas psula? If you remember, the Gemara asked if we know tamei the avodas psula, and we know a tefil yoim the avodas psula, so why isn't mechutzer kippurim the avodas psula? So the Gemara answered that if it would only hit tumah on tefil yoim, I would say. Do you remember what the tzrichas was? The Gemara wanted, why do you need all three? So the Gemara said, if you had tumah and tefil yoim, I would have said. What would I have said? I don't remember what I would have said. So let me quickly look it up. If you remember. See if I can find it. The Gemara says. The Gemara asks, why do I need a pasuk for? Why do I need a pasuk to tell you about the tumah that pasuk avodah? Why can't I know it from tumah and tefil yoim? Why do I need a pasuk for mechusar kippurim, which we're bringing now? So let me see if I can find it. We just had this Gemara. Here it is. Right to Zion. The Gemara said. Oh, here. The Gemara said, "The Teisim Hanach, Mal Hanach shekem psulim but shekem poislim b'truma." A tefil yoim who touches truma passes the truma, but a mechusar kippurim doesn't. So just because I have a pasuk that a tefil yoim passes avodah, I wouldn't know that a mechusar kippurim passes avodah. So how do I know that a mechusar kippurim passes avodah? You know, makra v'chibur aleh akoyin v'tahera. That's what it says about the yoiledas. Tahera. It's much that before she brought her karbonos, she had a tumah she had a tumah. Therefore, once we know that she has a din of tumah, we know that it says v'yinozru v'lo yichalalu. We know that someone who's tumah has to be yinozru, has to separate himself from the tumah. That's how we learned that tumah, someone who's tumah, will be mechalal the avodah. If you remember, the Gemara asked, why don't you learn from Tamei and Mechusik Yippurim? From there, you should know Tfil Yoim. Zok Gemara, you could say Mal Mechusik Yippurim and Tamei that they're Mechusam Isa. Something has to happen in order to trigger their Torah. Majagan Tfil Yoim automatically becomes Torah. So the Gemara said that's not a kasha because Mechusik Yippurim is a Tumah Kalusha. It's a degraded Tumah. So the Gemara says it might be a degraded Tumah by the Yoledes, but by the Zov, we're going according to the Shita that a Zov and the Mitzayra are Mamish and Ava Tumah until they bring their Kabbanas. So they're a real Tumah. So the reason why the Gemara couldn't learn that it passes Avodah from a Yoledes is obvious, because a Yoledes would be psula to do the Avodah even if she was completely tar, because she's a female. Zok Gemara weiter. The Vraglaim, the Mishnah says that someone who didn't wash his hands from the kiyar, he will pass the avodah. How do you know that? We learned this already. We had a pasuk by mechusa begodim that taught us as follows. If you remember, we brought multiple psukim that mechusa begadim passes avodah. Right? We had one to tell you that if it's extra begadim, we want to tell you that even if it's not an avodah, that's part of the devarim hama'akvim. So this is the first pasuk that the Gemara brought down. So it says alashon chuk over here, and by the kira, by washing your hands from the kira, it says Vraglaim, so it says chak by each of these places, just like the not wearing mechusa begadim passes the avodah, so too not doing Kiddush Yadaim Vraglaim will pass the avodah. Tanu Rabbana, Kohen Gadol shaloi tovel v'shaloi Kiddush. A Kohen Gadol who didn't tovel and he didn't do Kiddush. Now this is referring to specifically on Yom Kippur. So this is a good daf to learn on Yom Kippur. We know that there's 5 beged changes. There's 5 times where the Kohen changes from either the big day Lavan to the big day Zav and vice versa. And each time he had to make 2 Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. One when he took off the beged that he was taking off, and the other one was when he put the beged on that he was putting on, and in between there was a tefillah. So there's a shaila when he was taking off the beged. Does he do Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim before he takes off the beged or after he takes off the beged? So either he does Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim, takes off the beged, or he takes off the beged, then does Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim, then he goes to the mikveh, then he puts on the new beged, and then he does Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim a second time. So what if Shaloi Tavav or Shaloi Kiddush ben beged lebeged uben avodah la avodah ve'ovad and he did avodah on Yom Kippur, avodah seksher, his avodah will still be kosher. If he didn't do Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim in the morning, there it'll be possible. But if he didn't do all the extra ones that are mentioned in the psukim that talk about avodah Yom Kippur, it would not pass. V'yechad kohen gadol v'yechad kohen hedish like Kiddush Yadav Vraglav shachris v'avad, there it's avodah psul. So the chukah that we learn that Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim is mandatory and it will pass al avodah, that's only referring to the daily Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim that they do before they do avodah. But the multiples that the kohen gadol had to do on Yom Kippur, that's not included. Let's think about this. Chomesh tevilos v'asar kedushin, the 5 tevilos and the 10 times that you have to do Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim, they rise. We learn it out they rise it because if you read the pasuk, if you read the psukim, it alludes to those. The chsiv Dr. Rashi, v'rachat es pesari b'mayim uleveisham. V'hasam yalav kulabilsa. If you learn the Gemara Yuma, it takes you through all the lemunim how we know this, but it's a deraisa. And we know the chukah ksiv behu. It also says choik in the parsha of Yom Kippur. After it doesn't say choik directly related to the Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim, but related to all of the avodah of Yom Kippur. It says in the pasuk. This is referencing all of the above, the different halachas of how we do the Yom Kippur process. But it says all about this, that it's a chukas olam. So all of those 10 Kiddush Yadaim Vraglaim should be followed with the word chukah, which we should be able to learn from a chus begadim that passes the avodah. Le'akvu, they should all be ma'akiv. Omerlei, he answered back. Rabbi Yochanan answered back to Basi. Omer kra ulevesham. The pasuk says ulevesham, which is an extra pasuk. Let's look at the pasuk. It says, "Kosaynis bad kodesh yilbash umichlas evad yiyu al b'saray." So it already tells us that they have to wear the big day kahuna. Uba'avnet bad yachar u'mitznefes bad yitznoif. So the pasuk already made quite clear that they have to wear the big day kahuna. But the pasuk continues. Big day kodesh shem v'rachatz b'saray b'mayim b'saray ulevesham. There's an extra tzivoy to wear these begodim. Why is there an extra tzivoy? Zok to Gemara, that's to teach us. Levisha ma'akeves vein davar acher ma'akev. The ulevesham tells us don't say the chukah applies to everything, because here, since it says ulevesham, the Torah is trying to tell us that the only thing that's ma'akev in the parasha of Yom Kippur is they have to wear the begodim, but not necessarily all the rest, such as the Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim and all the mikvahs, they wouldn't be ma'akev.
It's just the first one in the morning.
Yes. So Tzavu Panav, Rab Asi got so excited. Rabbi Yochanan, you said such a beautiful Kiddush. I'm so excited with your Kiddush. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan said, don't get so excited with my Kiddush. I pulled the wool over your eyes. Vav al uvsa kasvila. You have a vav that's written in a crack. In other words, Rashi has two pshatim. Either mean you wrote it on a cracked piece of wood, so the vav is interrupted because there's a whole bunch of breaks in it, or the vav is good for the crack. In other words, I sold you a faulty sock, because if that's what you're going to learn, and this is what Moti was alluding to, Ihachi de Tzafranami. If you're going to tell me that on Yom Kippur there's a special limud that there the only thing that's ma'akiv is the big day kahuna, so then it should also say that on Yom Kippur the very first Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim shouldn't pass the avodah. Amar Chizki, Amar Kra, it says in the pasuk, "V'oisa lahem chak olam loy ulazaroi l'dayroisam," and we learn davar hama'akiv v'zaroi ma'akiv bohi. Even the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, anything that's ma'akiv on the Kohen Hedjit, the zaroi of Aaron, the Kohen or the Kohen Hedjit, anything that's going to be ma'akiv for the Kohen Hedjit will also be ma'akiv for the Kohen Gadol. And of course, the first tefillah of the first Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim of the day is ma'akiv v'zaroi, and therefore it's ma'akiv for Aaron HaKohen as well. And dover she'ein ma'akiv v'zaroi, meaning all the multiple Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim, because they don't have those at all, because they are not the Kohen Gadol, those will not be ma'akiv. Ein ma'akiv boy will not be ma'akiv for the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yoni says, I don't need Chizkiya's pasuk. I have a different pasuk to tell us the same halacha. It says, "V'rachzu mimenu Moshe v'Aaron ubanav." Who has to wash from the kiyar? Moshe v'Aaron ubanav. So the same limud. Davar ma'akiv b'banav only if it would be ma'akiv by the banav ma'akiv boy. Davar she'eni ma'akiv b'banav and ma'akiv boy. So therefore, the first Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim of the day will be ma'akiv. Frankly, Rabbi Yoni said, "My time alone with the Chizkiya." Chizkiya had a very good pasuk. V'yisalahav hak olam loy ulazarei. So why couldn't Rabbi Yoni learn it from Chizkiya's pasuk? Amalach, because ahila darius udichsid. That's not to tell you that limud. It's to tell you loyal zayil deraisim, to tell us that this halacha, that there's a chiyah to wash your hands, Yadayim Vraglaim, from the kiyar is not just for that generation. Lo olam voed in the Beis Hamikdash. That's how the avodah goes down. Ve'idach. And what about Chizkiya? My time alone or my high? Why didn't he learn it from the pasuk of Barachtu Mimenu Moshe v'Aaron Ivanav? Tomorrow boy lelichan Rabbi Yosy b'Rab Chanina. The Amar Rabbi Yosy b'Rab Chanina call kiyar she'ein boy kedei lakadesh arba kayanim. The size of the kiyar has to be enough that it can contain water, enough water for 4 kohanim to do Kiddush Yadaim Vraglaim, mimenu from it, and if not, in Yikachabo, it's not a kosher kiyur. How do you know it has to be that size? Shenema v'rachtu mimenu Moshe, Aaron, u'Banav. Moshe, Aaron, and Banav plural is 2, so it has to be enough water. The kiyur has to contain enough water that you would be able to service 4 kohanim. If not, it's a possible kiyur. It's not a valid kiyur. Taner Rabbanan, Ketzad mitzvahs Kiddush. How do you make Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim? Zog to Gemara, Maniach Yoda Hayamonis al Gabe Ragloi Hayamonis. You put his right hand on his right foot. It's very similar to the Twister. The Gemara is going to ask that kasha. So you put your right hand on your right foot, and there's a shaila. You're touching your foot. While you're touching your foot, you're doing Netilas Yadayim. It's like Toivel B'Sheres B'Yodai. So it's brought down. Why is your foot tamei? Because it's a part of your body that's normally covered. But the Vibal Kohanim walk barefoot in the Beis Hamikdash, could be their feet, would not be metama. Maniach Yoda Yamos al Gabi Ragla Yamonis. V'Yoda Asmolos al Gabi Ragla Asmolos. You could bend your knees. You don't have to touch your toes that way. But the other pshat is you don't put it mamish touching. You just put it over in a vertical line. Umekadesh, and that's how you do it. This is twister. Maniach shtei yodav zu al gab zu. Al gaba shtei raglov zu al gab zu. So you one foot on top of the other foot, and your 2 hands on top of the other. Umekadesh. Amruloi hiflakta. I think you're pushing the envelope because most Jews aren't in shape to be able to balance themselves in such a position while they're washing. Iyav Shalasus came. You can't do that. Shaper Karmelai, I think he has a good point. How could you do that? Rabbi Yosef, you're always you're allowed to lean on somebody to support you while you're in this position. My benayu, what's the machloikis as to whether or not this is a possible way to do it or not? Because Lamais, everybody agrees you have a way of doing it by leaning on something. The shaila is, we know that you have to be standing while they're doing the Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. How do we know that they have to be standing? Zok Rashi, we're going to soon see there's lamoid l'sharis. They have to be standing. So the question is, if you're leaning on something, one mandam holds yes, and therefore you could do it this way. The other mandam holds no, and therefore you have to do it separately. Omar Absama Bereja Basi Ravina Velaysev Vesav Lakadosh. Why do they have to be standing? Amar Kral l'sharis. By the here it says l'sharis v'sheiris mu'muru. And doing avoda has to be done standing. Tosfos has some very interesting points. So let's look at Tosfos b'chaver Messiah from Maseches Tamid Mashma the Oisoi Shoyhalach Tumas Adeshin, the very first kohen who did the first avoda, who was before everybody else. He went to Jewish Adeshin. Mechidi. He went by himself. Vahi Pligi Oy Hayasham Davar Shoy Messiah. So the question is, how would he do it? So it could be there was some other thing that he could lean on. If you're leaning on something, it's not called a midah. The balkar who's leaning has to stand. He shouldn't lean on the bima. He should do Amar b'Megillah perak akaris b'Megillah. I made the b'Torah boy amida. We shall minami amina the asur lismach. You're not allowed to lean while you're leaning. Just like the Torah was given Be'ema on Har Sinai, leaning is not a way you stand Be'ema. Zok to Gemara weiter. Tanu Rabbanan, Kiddush Yodav Vraglav B'Yod. What if a person did avoda and he stayed late and he was working at night too, doing Hakravis Amurim? The boss asked him to work overtime. The halach is ein tzarich l'kadosh b'layla. He doesn't have to make a new Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. His Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim that he did at the beginning of the day has not expired. But b'layla tzarich l'kadosh b'yom. If he did it by night, come daybreak, that's mafsik, and you would have to do a new Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Divrei Rebbe. So your Rebbe Omer lina mo'elas b'Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Lina meaning daybreak is when lina sets in, will impact the Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. You need a new one. Lina will not have any impact. He can continue working without doing Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim in the morning. Tanya idich, what if someone was bringing korbanos all night long? La'oira ton Kiddush Yadaim Vraglaim Divrei Rebbe. The same sheet as Rebbe before, that you have to do Kiddush Yadaim. Come daybreak, you got to do it again. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon Aimer, Kiven Shekidesh Yadav Vraglaim B'Tchilas Avoda. Afilu Mikan V'Adasar Yomim. Even if he was doing a marathon of Avoda for 10 days straight, Eino Tzarech Lakadesh, he wouldn't have to make Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Now they ask on this. First of all, it's impossible to stay up 3 days without any sleep, more than 3 days without any sleep. So he would have had to sleep. That's for sure going to be a hefsek. So there are those who change the girsa from Asar Yomim to Shlosh Yom. Another problem with Asar Yomim is that includes a Friday night. Friday night, you're not maktir any karbanis, because you can't be maktir the karbanis from Friday on Shabbos, and the Talmud of the Shabbos wasn't relevant yet. So for sure, Friday night, no one does avodah, so there would be a hefsek as well. So that's why they learned it's 3 days. Utricha, you need a machlokes. Sai in the case where he was at night and he moved on to the day, and Sai in this brisa where it talks about doing a marathon of avodah. Yashmin and Kamaisa. If we only had the first halacha, the Ted Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim at night expires in the morning, but not necessarily was the kohen engaged in avodah the entire time, I would say, Bahikam Rebbe, the pasuk lay me'avodah la'avodah, because he took a break. Avul Baha. But in the second brisa, where it's clearly a case where he didn't stop working, it said, the loy pasuk lay Rebbe Rebbe Shimon. Maybe Rebbe would agree that there you don't have to make another Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Yashmin Baha. In the case where you were working steady, then I would say, Baha Kamer Rebbe Shimon, that you don't need Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Avul Baha. But in the case where you stopped, Rebbe. Look at my time of the Rebbe. What is this far of Rebbe who says that just merely in the morning, even if you're doing the avodah and you weren't mafsik, you still have to make a new Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim? So let's look at the pasuk that talks about the kiyar. When they come to the oil moed, yirchatzu mayim, and therefore v'lo yamusu, because they'll die, they'll be chayiv mis if they do avodah without it. Oy v'gishtam el mizbech. So it's either v'voyim el oil moed or begishtam when they approach the mizbech. So Rabbi says begishtam. It says begishtam. What does begishtam tell you? Zok Rashi. Rashi says v'gisha de shachris gisha achritihi. Even though you were working all night, but when you start coming to do the avodah in the morning, that's called a new agosha. It's a new approach to the mizbech. Shorayeshkan ma'rocha chadasha. We know that they do Trumas Hadeshem, they take some of the ashes off, and then for the new karbonis, they have a new maracha. So therefore, it's a new begishtam. And a begishtam, not only a bevayam, but a begishtam el mizbeach also triggers a chiyuv of Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Bevayam means when you come, one coming. As Rashi says, bevayam v'harei lo yotza, he didn't leave. The original coming, when he came to the Beis HaMikdash report for duty that day, is still valid. Zokt Gemara ve'idich nami yaksiv bevoyam. But Rebbe, you have to agree. It says bevoyam. Zokt Rebbe, yes, because iksiv begishtam v'lo iksiv bevoyam. If it only says begishtam and not bevoyam, you know what I would have thought? Havamina I'll call gisha v'gisha. I would have thought that every time he approaches the mizbeach, even in the day, or during one night or during one day, he would have to once again do Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Because bevoyam. No, when he comes to the Beis HaMikdash. Meaning once a day, once at night, once a day. V'idach nami. What about the Rebbe Shimon haksiv begishtam, which is mashma every time you come to the mizbeach? Talk more because iksiv bevoyam v'loiksiv begishtam have amina afilu abiyah reikanis. What if a kohen is coming to the Beis HaMikdash, but he's not doing avodah? He's just coming to be there. You might think he needs Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Kamash malon, you don't have to. Begishtam davke if he's doing avodah. Abiyah reikanis. Why would I think that Abiyah Rekanis he would need to do Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim? Haksiv l'shares. It says l'shares. It says because of l'shares. So l'shares tells you it's only irrelevant if you're doing the avodah. So to the kasha, according to Rabbi Lezer Shimon, why does it need the pasuk begishtam? El begishtam mibayla l'chidr Rabbi Yaakov. The Amar Rabbi Yaakov hakoil moedim. Everybody agrees. B'kiddush sheni. We had a discussion earlier. Every time the Kohen Gadol changed his clothing, he made Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. So there's a machlokes when he took off the begodim that he was putting away for the time, did he make Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim while he was still dressed, or did he first get undressed and then make Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim? There's a machlokes about it. But Kula Alma Moida, after he went to the mikvah, when he changed into the new clothing, for sure he changes into his new clothing before Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. So Kol Moedim B'Kiddush Sheni Kishu Lovish Mekadosh. How do you know that? My time with Damakra Oy Begishta, right when he's about to approach the Mizbeach. Clearly he must already be dressed, because he's definitely not about to approach the Mizbeach if he's not dressed. The pasuk also says, and then it sticks in l'sharesh lahakter yishol Hashem. Wasn't again lahakter yishol Hashem. Lamali. Why is that word mentioned in reference to Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim? Mati, please read the next words because I ran out of racetrack over here. I would have thought that the only type of avodah that you need to do Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim for is an avodah that's ma'akev de kapara, but being makter on the mizbeach, being makter ivorim on the mizbeach, which are not ma'akev de kapara. Once the zrika is done, there is that avodah is not ma'akev. You would think you don't need Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Kamash from the hakdish Hashem, even to be makter de murim, which are not ma'akev de kapara sakarban, even that requires Kiddush Yadayim Vraglaim. Baruch Hashem, we're right on time. We right on the daf in the mission. Tomorrow we will learn daf chaf. Everyone should have an awesome